Most BCBAs I know don't need convincing that parent training is important. You already believe that. You already want parents to be involved. You've read the articles, you've taken the CEU courses, you've tried the checklists. But here's the part that no one says out loud. It doesn't feel like it's working. You're chasing parents for sessions when they finally meet with you. You're not even sure if it's making a difference. I see this all the time in comments in Facebook groups. Deep down, you might be starting to wonder if you're the problem. Let me tell you, you're not. What's broken isn't you. It's the system that most of us inherited or never learned to build in the first place. See, most BCBAs are taught how to teach skills to children or to reduce challenging behavior. We're not taught how to build parent training systems that feel valuable, not just clinically valuable, but valuable to the families that we serve, valuable enough that parents actually want to come back, that they actually ask for more parent training. And without that system in place, you end up working 10 times harder for half the results. You give them great systems and strategies, but they don't follow through with your recommendations. You run great parent training sessions, but parents cancel the next one. And no one taught you what to do about it. That's what this course is here to fix. We're going to talk about building parent training that parents actually want by designing systems that make participation sustainable, valuable, and collaborative. Not just one more CEU on parent engagement. This is about how you structure your parent training from the ground up so that it works for you and for them. Most parent training isn't failing because you're doing it wrong. It's failing because the system that surrounds it is incomplete. So think about this. If a parent only gets parent training when their schedule happens to align with yours, that's a system gap. If there's no consistent way for you to know what the parent values, that's a system gap. If the parent never sees visible signs that what they're doing is working, that's a system gap. If the feedback you're getting is too little, too late to adjust in real time, you guessed it, there's another system gap. The field is full of great techniques, but weak systems leave us stuck chasing parents instead of building relationships with them. The good news is that systems are fixable. And when we fix the system, everything downstream just gets easier. Here's what you're going to walk away with today. You're going to be able to identify and close those system gaps in your current parent training approach. You're going to learn to build a structure that makes participation easier for parents, not harder. You're going to know how to collect and use parent feedback in ways that improve trust and outcomes. And you're going to have the tools to connect parent training to what families actually care about and reinforce participation through visible value. And you're going to walk away with a framework you can start using this week, and there's no overhaul required. We are not here to add more tasks to your plate. We're here to make those tasks that you're already doing work better, be more effective, and feel easier. And that starts with designing better systems. But as usual, I'm getting ahead of myself. For those of you who don't know me yet, I'm Amelia Delphonse. I'm a BCBA and I co-founded Master ABA with my twin sister, Diana Kelly. Through Master ABA, we help BCBAs gain confidence in their skills so they can have a greater impact with their learners. Our focus is on compassionate, learner-centered practices. This course is eligible for CEUs. You must watch the video all the way to the end. There will be a short quiz in the mission accomplished lesson. You must also submit this quiz to receive your CEU certificate. There will be 3 code words throughout the presentation. Make sure to write these down. I'm going to repeat them, but they won't appear on your screen. So you will need to be listening to catch the code words. You're going to need these code words for the quiz. please make sure to hit the submit button at the bottom of the form, not just the mark complete button at the bottom of the lesson. We're using an embedded Google form, so you want to make sure to submit the form. In the form with the quiz is also a brief survey. I appreciate your feedback because this helps me improve the courses that I'm creating. And if you've been following my courses over time, you've probably seen that I have improved my presentation and the courses that I'm offering based on your feedback. So I really do listen and appreciate it. If for some reason you miss a step or have any trouble with your certificate, please email me at support@masteraba.com. I'm happy to help with anything that you need. You're going to see some disclaimers in some of the images in this presentation. These disclaimers are required by the Canva license for any image that includes a child where it might be assumed that the child has a disability. I'm a rule follower, as many of you know, so that's why they're there. I've gotten some feedback about this, so I want you all to know why the disclaimer is there. I want to respect the rights of the parents who have chosen to share images of their children so that we can have better visuals in our presentations. Before we jump in, I want to make sure that you have your first code word. That code word is system. When you use a system for parent training, it might just become your favorite service to provide. So let's get right into it. If you're thinking, well, that sounds great, but how do I actually do that when I'm already stretched so thin? Believe me, I get it. I didn't start with a system. In fact, early in my career, I was the BCBA scrambling to fit in parent training, hoping that parents would magically engage with me. When I first became the director of 2 clinics in New Hampshire, I had 26 clients, 16 staff, and no system for parent training. The reviewer from our largest funder kept rejecting my treatment plans because she wanted us to transition all services to home. She said repeatedly that skills learned in the clinic couldn't generalize to home unless all services were transitioned to the home. But we were a clinic. I couldn't agree to do this, but after digging into the research, I decided that parent training was the answer I was looking for. But here's the thing. I couldn't just check the box and say that I was providing parent training. That didn't stop her from calling me. I had to prove to the reviewer that my parent training worked to generalize skills to the home. At first, I tried harder, just providing more training, more handouts, more modeling strategies, but I kept running into the same wall. Without a system that made parent training consistent, visible, and valuable to families, the things that I was doing just didn't stick. That experience forced me to dig into the research even deeper, rethink my entire approach, and ultimately create the systems that I'm going to be sharing with you today. And once I did, parent training stopped feeling like a compliance activity and started becoming a part of services that families were actually asking for. And that's what I want for you too. Without a system in place, you end up working 10 times harder for half the results. You give great strategies, but parents don't follow through. You run great sessions, but parents cancel the next one. And no one taught you what to do about it. And here's why. Most of what we call parent training isn't actually designed to create value for parents over time. It's designed to check off requirements. It's designed to match what funders expect. It's designed to fit around an overloaded clinical schedule. We teach what we think are important skills, but they might not have value to the parent. Our parent training rarely answers the most important question. Why should this parent want to keep showing up? When that's missing, here's what happens. Parent training gets pushed to the end of the session or canceled altogether. Goals are written for the treatment plan and direct services, not for the family's priorities. Parents don't see progress, so they stop showing up. And BCBAs end up chasing participation instead of building partnerships. It's not a motivation problem, it's a system problem. The field is full of great techniques, but when the system around them is incomplete, even the best strategies aren't going to stick. The good news is that systems are fixable, and when we fix the system, everything downstream gets better. Before we go further, I want to pause here for a second, because if any part of what I just said felt uncomfortably familiar, if you're thinking, maybe I just haven't figured this out yet, I want you to hear this. This isn't your fault. Most of us were handed parent training systems that were never built to succeed in the first place. And here's what I mean by that. The models many of us inherited were designed to meet funder requirements, not to create an experience parents would want to sustain. We learned how to document parent participation, not how to design parent training systems that parents feel ownership of. We've been asked to individualize parent training, but most of us aren't given the time to do that. We're not given the tools or examples of how to make that work consistently. The expectation isn't there. The system to support us in creating that isn't there. And even in our own training, we were taught to focus on technical competence, writing great goals, selecting interventions, running discrete trials, but rarely were we taught the relational skills required to help parents feel heard, valued, and supported across the life of their child's services. And on top of that, most of the incentives in our organizations are designed to reward technical work, not family collaboration. How often have you been asked, how many parent-driven goals do you have in place? Or how often is parent feedback shaping your training? Or even, do parents feel that parent training is helping? We are operating inside systems that don't prioritize the outcomes we know matter most. That is not a personal failing. That is a system gap. And that's why this training matters, because you can't change everything overnight, but you can start building systems that fill those gaps. And when you do, parents notice, outcomes improve, and the work feels better for everyone involved. If you're sitting there thinking, okay, I want to do this, but where would I even start? Don't worry about it. We're here for you. A lot of BCBAs recognize the need for parent training systems and still feel stuck trying to build one. And here's why. You don't have visibility into what a good parent training system actually looks like. Most of us have never seen a well-structured, fully integrated parent training system in action. And without examples, it's hard to know what to aim for or what pieces should even be part of that system. The research is a little bit scattered. There's great research on compassionate care, cultural humility, and parent training strategies, but no one has stitched together all of those pieces into a practical, scalable system. You'd have to synthesize dozens of articles to build one yourself on top of your clinical workload. And the demands of your job don't stop just because you need to create a system for parent training. Even if you carve out time to start building a system, it gets pushed aside because you have a new client intake, or you're experiencing some staff turnover, or there might be an insurance audit, or you're facing other crises. Building a system requires focused time, and most BCBAs don't get that luxury. And it's hard to know what will work across families. Without a guiding framework, it's easy to over-standardize and lose parent buy-in. And it's equally easy to over-individualize and lose the sustainability. Finding that balance is tricky without a clear map. And it might feel risky to experiment. When your caseload is full and your outcomes matter, Trying to build something new from scratch can feel a little bit unsafe. Without tools, it's easy to fall back on what you know, even if it's not working very well. These are real barriers, and part of what we're going to do in this course is give you a structure to follow so you don't have to build it from the ground up on your own. So when you look at those barriers, it's no surprise that so many BCBAs end up feeling stuck. We care. We know parent training matters, but building the system that makes it work is the piece that most of us were never taught. And I'm going to be honest, I learned this the hard way. Let me share a quick story that really drove this home for me. I worked with a father who was incredibly difficult to engage. He would talk over me, he'd rant about unrelated topics, and he would resist anything that felt like work to him. At first, I didn't come up with a clear way to help. I'd show up, I'd hope for a productive conversation, and I'd end up spending most of the session managing the interaction with very little to show for it. I kept thinking, why won't he just follow through? Why is this so hard? But here's what I've learned and what the research backs up. It's not enough to have the right content. You can teach the best ABA strategies in the world, but without a solid process to support the parent, those strategies rarely stick. In fact, studies show that process matters just as much as content when it comes to whether families can actually implement what we teach. And when parents don't follow through, it's usually not because they don't care or aren't trying. It's often a sign that the system around them, the way the training is structured, supported, and reinforced, is incomplete. That's something Allen and Warzak highlighted 25 years ago. The authors found that parent non-adherence is very often a system problem and not a parent motivation problem. And here's the trap. When we see that lack of follow through, it's easy to slip into our own biases. We start thinking, this parent just isn't invested, or they're just not trying hard enough. Now, what thoughts does this image bring up for you? What if one or both of these children were your clients? So here's the thing. Research on implicit bias shows how easily those kinds of assumptions can creep in, even when we don't intend them to. It's something that our brains naturally do to help us process the overwhelming amount of information that we need to process every minute of every day. We wouldn't be able to function if our brains didn't have a way to categorize the information that we're bringing in. And when those biases creep in, they affect how we show up to those sessions, whether we realize it or not. Now, add parent stress to all of this, and we have a recipe that sets us and parents up for failure. High levels of parent stress, which are common in the families that we serve, reduce a parent's capacity to participate fully, no matter how motivated they are. So when you combine a system that's incomplete, subtle biases in how we interpret what's happening, and high parent stress limiting their ability to engage, it's no wonder so many parent training programs feel like they're a struggle. That's exactly what's happening in that situation with the father that I mentioned. Once I came in with a clear plan, anchored the conversation to what he cared about, and built structure around how we tracked progress, everything started to change in that parent training. The conversation stayed a lot more focused. We built trust and momentum. And most importantly, he started following through because the system supported him in doing that. That's what we're going to focus on today, building systems that make parent participation easier, more natural, and more valuable for us and them. Before we build any system, we have to start here, because here's the truth. No system will work if it's built on the wrong priorities. And too often, Without meaning to, we build systems around our own priorities. We teach the skills we think are most important. We design goals that fit the treatment plan and meet the criteria of the insurance companies. We measure progress that looks good on paper. But if those goals don't connect to what the family actually values, parent participation disappears. Follow through goes away, and the trust that families have in us erodes over time. And the research backs this up too. Kogel et al. 1996 found that when parent priorities were honored in intervention, both parent participation and child outcomes improved. Bears et al. 2015 showed that parent training is significantly more effective when it's tied to what parents actually want to see improve in their daily lives. That shouldn't be surprising. And ACT-based approaches give us powerful tools that help families identify those priorities, and that's Hayes et al. 2011 and Vincent 2014. When I first started working in the field, I was working with a mom of 2 autistic children. These kids were tough, lots of severe behavior, and she was really just one of the most dedicated moms that I've ever met. I did what most BCBAs do. I looked at the treatment plan, I picked a few goals for parent training, and I started teaching her what I thought she needed to know. We spent months working through the ABCs of behavior. I kept trying to help her see how her behavior patterns were reinforcing the challenging behaviors that we were trying to eliminate. But nothing changed. Finally, I asked her, why aren't you using the interventions that I'm recommending? She said something that I'm never going to forget. She said, I just don't see how this is going to help. And in that moment, I realized that I had never actually asked her what she cared about. I just assumed that her priorities were the same as mine, and that was to reduce the severe behaviors her children were engaging in. When I finally did ask her about what was most important to her, I learned that her biggest fear was what would happen to her children when she wasn't there anymore. She wanted them to become more independent, not just to reduce their tantrums. By ignoring her values, I had built a system she had no reason to engage with. And it's not just about individual values. Cultural values shape what families want from us. I'm going to give you 2 really quick examples. I was working with a family from Ukraine. Their daughter was 12 and sleeping in bed with her grandmother. I immediately jumped to suggesting strategies to help her sleep independently. But that wasn't the priority for this family. In their culture, co-sleeping was completely normal. What they wanted help with was helping her fall asleep faster. If I hadn't stopped to listen, I would have built an entire parent training plan around something they didn't even want to change. And the other story I want to share is one that's really stuck with me for a whole lot of years. I worked with a Vietnamese mom whose son was very challenging and engaged in a lot of tough behaviors. She was struggling deeply with guilt, wondering if something she had done had caused his autism. And one day she even asked me, when will he go live with someone he likes? She believed that her son's unhappiness meant that he didn't love her and that eventually he would go live somewhere else. And at this time, he was only 6 years old. And can you imagine a parent feeling like your 6-year-old doesn't want to live with you? Can you imagine trying to build a behavior plan without understanding this dynamic? Fong et al. 2016 and Wright 2019 emphasize that cultural humility is essential in these moments because without it, we risk imposing our priorities and losing the family's trust. So at that time, I was doing a lot more pushing through challenging behavior. And by doing that, his behaviors escalated and she was feeling like he didn't like her and didn't want to be with her. So how do we do this better? One of my favorite tools is the ACT Matrix, which was originally created in 2009 by Dr. Kevin Polk. It's a simple way to help families talk about what matters most to them in that moment. When you complete the ACT Matrix with a family, you explore questions such as, what do they want more of? What do they want less of? What gets in the way of getting the things that they want or accessing the things that they value? And what does success feel like in their daily life? When you start here, you can design parent training that feels immediately valuable to the family because it's aligned with what the family actually wants to achieve. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about using this tool with families, but I do have a couple of other CEU courses that provide more specific instructions, including a course called The Active Collaboration, using the ACT Matrix to empower parents. I'll make sure to link that below so that you can dive a little bit deeper if you don't have that experience with ACT. Even just using the ACT Matrix to guide the questions you ask parents and to shift your language when speaking to parents makes a huge difference in how they respond to you and how invested they become in services. So if you don't have a lot of experience in ACT, I recommend taking some training on it. It's really valuable in both your personal and professional worlds. Even if you don't take mine, there's lots of available trainings. I highly recommend you digging into it a little bit more. But on the other hand, when we jump straight into teaching without understanding values first, parents disengage because the system we build is based on our goals and not theirs. And no amount of good content is going to fix that. That's why the first part of building a parent training system that parents actually want is understanding what matters most to them. When you do that well, everything else gets easier. When you skip it, everything else gets harder. And now that we've laid that foundation, let's talk about the system framework for designing training that builds on that foundation. So the system framework starts with S, schedule for success. This isn't a checklist or a one-size-fits-all formula. It's a guide for designing parent training that actually works because it's built around the experiences, values, and realities of the families that you serve. Each part of the system framework is designed to help you close a specific system gap that's likely keeping your parent training from gaining traction. So we're going to walk through all 6 components. The S is scheduled for success, structure participation from the start. It's about making sessions predictable, accessible, and sustainable without chasing parents down every single week. And why is to yield to family context. So adapt to the family's culture, capacity, and stress level. This is where cultural humility moves from theory into your actual systems. The second S is survey and respond. Create structured ongoing feedback loops so you can adjust in real time and parents feel heard, not evaluated. The T stands for teach to prioritize. Connect strategies to what families actually care about. When goals feel personally meaningful, follow through improves significantly. E stands for engineer reinforcement for participation. Build natural reinforcement into your system. Parents need to see wins and feel progress, not just be told what to do. And M stands for measure and show progress. Track what matters to the family and make that progress visible. It's one of the most powerful ways to keep parents invested in services. Each part of the system framework addresses a barrier that we've talked about and helps you build a structure that makes parent training easier, more impactful, and more valued by the families that you serve. but we're going to take a closer look at each one of those parts of the framework. Let's start with the first piece of the framework, schedule for success. And I want to be clear, this isn't about putting parent sessions on the calendar. I all know that you're probably already doing that to some level. It's about building predictable, supportive routines around parent participation so that showing up isn't one more thing that parents have to figure out, but something that feels integrated into their life. Because here's what I found over and over again. When scheduling is left vague or optional, it drops to the bottom of the to-do list. But when it's built into the system, parents show up regularly. For a long time, I struggled with no-shows and cancellations. I'd offer flexible times, I'd send reminders, I tried to be accommodating, but still parents didn't come. When I was providing home-based services, I even had parents not answer the door when I knocked, even when I could hear them inside. Eventually, I shifted my approach. I started scheduling most of my parent training sessions either right before or right after the RBT session, depending on what worked best for the family. And the difference was immediate. It created a natural transition. The parent was already arriving or already home. The learner was present, so I could model and coach in the moment. I could share what we worked on in that session, if it was after the session, and I could give relevant, timely feedback. It saved time. I wasn't trying to chase down a separate meeting. And what changed wasn't the content of the training that I was providing, it was the system around the parent training that I was already providing. Allen and Morzak 2000 put it plainly, effective treatment isn't enough. Parent non-adherence is rarely about the strategy itself. It's about whether we've designed supports that make follow-through realistic. Even the best content isn't going to lead to follow-through if the surrounding systems don't support it. Noel et al. 2005 found that follow-up systems significantly increased treatment implementation. When there was structure, including reminders, accountability, and consistent touch points, parents were more likely to follow through with services. And Taylor et al. 2019 highlighted that when scheduling feels rigid by BCBA centered, it actually reduces parent motivation. The more families feel like outsiders to their own child's care, the less likely that they are to actually engage. That means we don't just need a schedule, we need a supportive system for making that schedule work. So how do you actually start scheduling for success? Let's walk through a few things that make a big difference, and it made a big difference for me. I'm sure it's going to make a big difference for you. First, whenever possible, I recommend scheduling your parent training sessions around the RBT session. That natural transition time, either right before or right after, makes it way easier for parents to show up. They're already there. They don't need to carve out extra time in the middle of their day. And more importantly, it allows you to connect what you're teaching directly to what just happened in the session. Next, create a standard format for these meetings on your calendar. Something like every Thursday from 2:30 to 3, parent check-in after the RBT session. Simple, predictable, and it communicates that this is a regular expected part of services. It's not a last-minute add-on. You can also train your RBTs to support the flow of these check-ins. I used to ask my RBTs to prep one quick summary or highlight that they wanted me to bring to the next parent meeting. That could be a moment of progress, a challenge that we've run into, or something we want to work on. This made the meetings feel more collaborative, and it helped shift the dynamic from me talking about what the child was doing to the whole team collaborating with the parent. Once you're in that meeting, use the time for coaching, not just talking, because the learner is right there. You have a powerful opportunity to model a strategy, demonstrate prompting, or even have the parent practice a skill in the moment. Even a quick 15-minute session can be incredibly impactful when it's focused and grounded in what's actually happening with the child on that day. And here's one of the most important pieces. Don't wait to schedule these meetings until problems come up. Introduce this rhythm right from the very beginning. You might say something like, I meet with parents each week right before or after the RBT session. That way we can make sure we're all on the same page and give you the strategies that connect to what your child is learning. When you position it that way, it doesn't feel like an extra task. It feels like part of the support they're already getting. And over time, that's exactly what it becomes. This simple scheduling shift is one of the biggest drivers of change in my own parent training. It didn't just increase attendance, it made the meetings more useful, more connected, and more sustainable for me and for the parents. Scheduling is more than a logistics decision. It's the foundation of every other system that you're going to build. If you can't get in the room with the parent, nothing else you've designed is going to matter. So build the system around them, not in spite of them. All right, so Y stands for yield to family context. The purpose of this step is to create adaptive systems that honor the family's culture, circumstances, and capacity. So your training fits them, not the other way around. We've all seen what happens when systems are too rigid. You build a plan, you teach the strategy. Maybe it's something like set up a calm down corner and use the visual schedule to prompt a break when your child starts to escalate. It's a solid strategy. It's evidence-based. It's clear and effective in the right context. But something doesn't quite land. The parent doesn't follow through because they don't have a quiet space in their home. The visual schedule keeps getting torn off the wall by a sibling, and the parent's day is already packed with 2 jobs and a caregiving role for their own parent. This is where we need to pause and ask, are we designing systems that yield to the context the family is living in that moment? Or are we unconsciously asking families to yield to our expectations? Here's why this step is so important. Research on cultural humility by Teverlon and Murray Garcia, 1998, and Wright, 2019, reminds us that families are the experts in their own experience. If we build systems based only on what works for us, our training, our values, our assumptions, we risk missing what works for them. That's especially important when we consider how implicit bias affects system design. Studies by Greenwald and Krieger, 2006, and Nosek et al., 2011, show that our unconscious assumptions can influence how we interpret parent behavior, even when we don't mean to. We might think that we're really good, compassionate, and we're paying attention to parents. We might think a parent isn't trying, when really we've made participation too inflexible or too dependent on our own norms. And when families are under chronic stress, financial, emotional, logistical stress, asking them to fit a rigid structure into their life can push them away. That's not just speculation. It's backed by studies on parental stress by Berry and Jones, 1995, and Baker Erickson et al., 2005, which show that high stress reduces capacity to participate in interventions no matter how much parents care. So I'd love to get into more about how parent stress impacts their ability to follow through with treatment recommendations and how we can measure and reduce parent stress through effective parent training. But we'll be here for another hour at least. I do have another CEU training about this that's called Reducing Parent Stress Through Effective Parent Training. Currently, this course is only available in our dojo membership. I will put the link below if you're interested in checking it out. It's really interesting. There are some assessments, parent stress assessments available. So there are tools out there that can help you measure and reduce parent stress. There, we all know that what you measure, you can change if you have the right strategies. So if we're measuring parent stress, we can help reduce it for them. So let me tell you about a family I worked with, and we'll call them the Rodriguezes. They were wonderful. They were really committed to their daughter, and they were so kind. But for the first few months, they rarely participated in parent training. I tried to schedule sessions, and something always seemed to come up at the last minute, that maybe there was a schedule change, a last minute doctor's appointment. A grandmother was visiting from out of town. At first, I was really frustrated. I thought maybe they didn't value the training. But when I finally slowed down and asked more questions, I started learning something important. In their home, extended family plays a huge role in caregiving. The grandmother, the aunt, sometimes even a cousin were the ones actually carrying out most of the daily routines. But my training was really only directed toward the parents. Once I started including extended family in the sessions and adjusting the plan so that it reflected their roles, participation went way up. It wasn't about motivation, it was about fit for the family. So let's talk about how to put this into practice. You want to start with something simple, a culture question, a culture and context questionnaire. This doesn't have to be a formal assessment. You can just ask questions like, what does a typical day look like for your family? Or who usually makes the decisions about routines or discipline? Or what languages do you speak at home? Or what else helps out with your child? Or who else helps out with your child? You're not just collecting data. You're learning how this family functions so you can design a plan that fits their world. Then you need to be flexible in how you offer support. Some families might love a quick video check-in at night when things finally quiet down. And I recognize that sometimes that's not a billable service. Others might prefer sitting at the kitchen table with you. One family might want written materials in Spanish. Another might ask to include grandma because she's the one who handles homework every day. This step is all about meeting them where they are, both literally and figuratively. And finally, shift from delivering a training to co-creating the training with the parent. Instead of saying, here's what we're going to do, try something more like, here's one way we often approach this. How do you see this working in your home? Or who else in your family would be helpful to include in this conversation? Because when families feel like co-creators instead of passive participants, they're more likely to show up, speak up, and to actually stay involved. The second S stands for survey and respond. The purpose of this step is to build consistent feedback loops. So parents feel heard and you can adjust your system in real time. We say we want collaboration, but let's be honest. Most parent feedback systems are either non-existent or reactive when there's a problem. We ask for input when something's already going wrong, or we assume that no news is good news. We might send out a parent satisfaction survey once a year. But when parents don't feel like their voice matters, it shows up through quiet disengagement, missed sessions, or unspoken frustration. And that's where this step is so critical. Studies by Hook et al. 2013 and Mosher et al. 2017 on cultural humility show this clearly. Parents who perceive their providers as open, curious, and responsive are more likely to stick with treatment and feel satisfied with care. Taylor et al. 2019 found that incorporating caregiver feedback into treatment planning didn't just improve satisfaction, it actually improved outcomes. This isn't something that's just nice to have, it's a clinical imperative. And this brings us to our second code word, and that code word is feedback. It's such a critical part of parent training. So make sure to write that down. Again, your second code word is feedback. I want to tell you about a surprisingly powerful experience that I had, but it's actually not from a clinic or even with a client. It was a service technician. There was nothing dramatic, just routine maintenance at my house. And the service itself was just totally fine. It was quick, professional. There was nothing worth going to Google and leaving a review for. But what happened after he left stuck with me. As soon as he drove away, I got a text message. It said, "How was your experience today?" And there were two buttons, one with a smiley face and one with a frown. This is actually an image of the text message that I got. And that was it. There wasn't a long survey. There was no login and no pressure to leave a 5-star review, just a quick moment to be heard right in the moment. Because this was so simple, I tapped the happy face. It was fine. The service was fine. That opened a second screen where I could choose the technician's name and give a few quick ratings. It was fast, simple, and clear. If I'd clicked the sad face, I'm sure I would have been able to explain what went wrong. But the brilliance of the system wasn't just in the design, it was in the timing. They didn't ask for feedback a week later. They didn't wait until I was upset. They didn't send an email later. It was literally as soon as he walked out the door, I had the text message. They built the request into the experience while it was still fresh in my mind. And that wasn't even the only smart part. Before the technician arrived, I got another message. I had his name, his photo, even a short bio about who he was and who his family was. I live in Tampa. It's a big city. And like a lot of people, I don't love opening my door to someone I've never seen before. But that one message really changed how I felt. And it made me trust him before I even met him. And it made me think about our field. In ABA, especially early in my career, I used to show up to a new client's house with almost no context. The parent may have talked to me once on the phone, but suddenly I was there. I was walking out the door with their child. I was providing community-based services. I didn't send them a picture. There was no real introduction. It was just me, a stranger, holding their child's hand. If you've heard my story before, you probably know that I got my start in the field working in the community with autistic children through a community mental health center. Now, most of you aren't taking children out of their homes without their parents, but we do show up with no real introduction. And we wonder why parents hesitate, why they cancel sessions, and why they hold back. Now, imagine if we brought the same level of intentionality into our feedback systems as we see in the service industry. What if before the first visit, families received a short introduction, a name, a picture, a little bit about who's walking into their home? We have the technology that does this. It's not that hard. What if after every session or even once a month, they got a quick check-in? Simple questions. How supported did you feel this week? Is there anything you'd like us to change? No pressure, no multi-page survey, just a moment to be heard. That's what businesses across every industry already know. Trust is built when feedback is expected, easy, and used. And we shouldn't be doing this just to mimic customer service. We should be doing it because it works, and it's important for our clients and their families to feel heard. Research on cultural humility and compassionate care by Hook et al. 2013 and Taylor et al. 2019 tells us that when parents feel heard, they engage more. When we ignore feedback or wait too long to ask for it, it sends a message, even if unintentionally, that Your voice isn't part of this process. But when we ask early and often, it changes the dynamic. Parents start to see themselves as collaborators and not just bystanders. So let's talk about what it actually looks like to build feedback into your system. Because if we're being honest, most of us think we're getting feedback from parents. We might ask questions like, how's it going today? And they probably smile and say, good, I guess. But that's not real feedback. That's politeness. And we very often stop there. We miss what really matters. So, how can we do this better? We need to start by creating a process for feedback that doesn't have to be complex. It just needs to be something that's consistent. You could ask for a 2-minute reflection form at the end of every week. You could build in monthly check-in into your parent training flow. Or you could even use a visual scale or color-coded check-in track to track how the parent is feeling about support and implementation. But here's the key. Don't just collect feedback. You actually need to use it. If a parent says they're overwhelmed, slow down. If they say a strategy isn't working, then revisit the plan. Even if you're clinically right, relationally, you might need to pivot because that's how trust is built, not through perfect protocols, but through small, visible moments of listening and adjusting to what the parents are saying. One of my favorite ways to collect feedback, and one I've used personally, is through a structured Google form that connects directly to a live spreadsheet. The form includes 5 short items about the RBT session and 5 about the BCBA session. They're rated on a Likert scale, and parents can also give star ratings and add comments if they want. So here are a few examples of the items on the form. The RBT demonstrated respect for me and my family, such as using respectful language, arriving on time, etc. Or the BCBA made me feel heard and included in decisions about my child's progress. They're simple, clear, and actionable. And once a parent fills it out, the data automatically gets sent to a Google spreadsheet and charted with no extra effort. So this is what that looks like. It shows up in a Google sheet when it's graphed. Over time, this becomes your mirror. You can glance at a trend line and immediately see if things are getting better or if something needs your attention. And if you don't want to build this form from scratch, you don't have to worry about it. You can access a free copy of the form and the link spreadsheet. You're going to need to make a copy and plug it into your workflow and you're set. There are a few extra steps involved with making sure that the form is linked to the spreadsheet, but you can download the instructions in the bonuses section of this course if you're taking it for CEUs. I like to say that each survey is a mirror. It reflects what parents are seeing. The question is, are we willing to look in that mirror? T stands for teach to priorities. The purpose of this step is simple, but it's really powerful. Teach what matters to them so that the learning sticks. We've all been there. You teach us really good strategy and you're pretty excited about it. The data looks good, the child is making progress, but the parent still doesn't show up the next time. Or if they show up, they haven't changed anything at home. And it's easy to wonder, why aren't they using this? Or you might even blame the parent for not following through on what you recommended. And here's the truth that most of us are too busy to stop and consider. Even the best teaching doesn't matter if it's not aligned with the parent's priorities. When we build parent training goals around our clinical lens without checking in on what matters to the family, what we're really doing is asking them to learn something that doesn't feel relevant. And people don't like to follow through on irrelevant goals, not because they're unmotivated, but because the value isn't there. Let me tell you another quick story. It's about a parent I worked with early on in my career. Her daughter was showing frequent tantrums in public, especially when they had to leave a store without buying something that she wanted. So the goal we set in treatment was to improve tolerance for denied requests. We had a solid plan and a technically great protocol. I'm sure you've run programs similar to this in the past. But week after week, nothing changed at home. Mom would just nod along during training. She'd say she'd try it, but we weren't seeing any progress. And we all knew that mom wasn't using the strategies when I wasn't there. So I finally asked her about it. And I asked, what's the hardest part of your week right now? And she didn't hesitate. She said, I can't take her to the grocery store anymore. I used to enjoy shopping with her, but now I just avoid it. I feel trapped. And suddenly it clicked. She didn't want a goal that said tolerance for denied requests. She wanted her life back. She wanted to enjoy a simple trip to the grocery store without fear of a meltdown. We reframed the training and we focused on a grocery store plan with visuals, choices, and rewards. It's the same clinical skill, but now it actually mattered to her. So she practiced it, she used it, and told me later that was the first time I felt like I could handle it on my own. When training feels personally valuable, parents are more likely to engage, practice, and sustain it over time. And the research backs this up too. Kogel et al. 1996 and Bears et al. 2015 found that when parent goals were aligned with family priorities, outcomes improved significantly. Stokes and Bear 1977 reminded us decades ago that generalization happens best when the context is natural and meaningful. So let's stop dropping strategies into a parent's week and calling it parent training. Let's co-create teaching strategies that actually match their real life stressors, values, and desires. So how can you do this step? It starts with how you talk about goals. It's not just the language that you use, but it's the questions that you ask. Instead of starting with a goal bank or a list of standard objectives, I want you to start with a simple conversation. Sit with the parent and say, tell me about a moment in your week that feels the hardest, or where do you wish things felt just a little easier? You're not asking about behaviors, you're asking about real life, about their real life, because that's where the real goals live. I often use a question that might sound a little bit silly, but a lot of parents really appreciate it. I say, if I had a magic wand and could change just one thing, what would you want me to change? When a parent says, I dread taking him to the grocery store, that's not just a casual comment. It's a doorway to truly understanding what the family prioritizes. You might see transition tolerance or community skills, but what the family sees is survival of the day-to-day needs of her family. Her ability to walk through a store and not have to abandon a cart halfway through the store. That's the space where parent training begins to actually matter to the parents. And once you've identified that stress point, you need to reframe the goal in a way that actually reflects it in the way that makes the most sense to the parent. So you're not going to say something like, we're working on transition compliance. You want to say something more like, we're helping him leave the playground without a meltdown, so you don't have to avoid going altogether. And instead of saying, we're increasing independent mealtime skills, say something more like, we're teaching him to sit at the table and feed himself so you can actually enjoy dinner together. Our temptation is to fall back on goals that we think sound clinical, but they feel cold and disconnected to the family. When the parent hears themselves in the goal, they show up differently to parent training. They're not just learning strategies, they're solving problems that matter in their everyday life. And when that happens, they're more likely to follow through with the strategies that you recommend. They're more likely to trust the process. And they're more likely to feel that parent training is the best part of ABA, not just another item on their calendar. All right, so let's talk about the E in the system. Engineer reinforcement for participation. Because here's the thing, even when a parent believes in ABA, you know their child benefits from it. Even when they like you, even when they're committed to helping their child, life still gets in the way. Stress builds, schedules shift, and parent training becomes the thing that they skip when they're overwhelmed. When parents stop engaging or start canceling sessions, it's time to look at the contingencies that the parent is facing, not to throw more compliance-based rules at them. These parents are overwhelmed, yet our solution when parents fail to follow through is to tell them they need to meet with us or else. That or else is often termination of services. We explain to parents that the insurance requires their participation and expect them to follow through just because they should. As behavior analysts, why do we think that this is the best approach? When parents don't follow through, when they cancel parent training sessions or RBT sessions, that's a sign that the system isn't reinforcing enough to keep them coming back. This is where a little behavior analysis goes a long way. We know from Aubrey Daniels' picnic analysis of reinforcer effectiveness from 2009 that behaviors are more likely to happen when they lead to positive, immediate, and certain consequences. But most parent training is exactly the opposite. It's scheduled at inconvenient times, it's emotionally draining, and even when parents show up, they don't always feel like they've gained something valuable. The reinforcer we use for parents is that their child will improve someday. Progress in ABA services is really slow. What we're promising them is not clear, it's not immediate, and it's definitely not certain, at least not from their perspective. They don't see their role as vital because they don't know how to help their child. So how can we flip this? We need to build a system so that showing up is inherently reinforcing because something good happens right away. Parents need reinforcement for showing up just like our clients do. And here's what that looked like for me. I started designing every parent training session with small visible wins. Instead of spending 45 minutes explaining a complex ABA strategy or listening to them talk about the crisis of the week, I focused on one tiny shift the parent could make that day. And then I showed them how it worked with their child in that moment. I talked about how this shift can make the parent's life easier or how it would bring them closer to the life they envisioned with their child. That might mean prompting the parent to wait a bit before giving a preferred item and watching the child spontaneously request it. Or it could be reinforcing a short mealtime routine and seeing the child sit for a full 60 seconds for the first time. It could even be a child getting in the bathtub without a fight. Parents don't care about working on generalization of the tapping program their child is working on in the clinic. This has no connection to their everyday life. They do care about their child interacting with the book during story time. So you need to tie those together. This may seem like small things to us, but to a parent who's used to chaos or silence or meltdowns, those moments mean everything. And when we leave the session thinking, that worked, I can do this, they're far more likely to come back for the next session. So the big takeaway from this step of this framework is to look at the existing contingencies in your parent training. Are you giving parents a reason to show up and do the work? Here's how you can engineer reinforcement into your parent training system. Identify the parents' reinforcers. Are they motivated by less chaos? Is it more confidence? Are they motivated by predictability? Or maybe they're motivated just by feeling heard. Choose one to focus on in each session. Next, build in a quick win plan. Create a plan for those quick early victories so that parent experiences success before burnout sets in. Make sure that these wins align with what matters to the parents, not what's going on during the RBT sessions. It's incredibly powerful to make an immediate impact on a family, and even the smallest victories build your credibility with them. All right, so then you acknowledge progress out loud. You want to say things like, that moment right there, what he just did, that's new and you created it. Tie their efforts directly with something important their child did. It costs nothing, but it adds fuel to the fire of motivation. Without motivation, the parents have no reason to keep showing up. When you tap their motivation, they will be asking you to schedule an extra session. The goal here isn't to manipulate parents or sugarcoat the process. It's to recognize that participation, like any other behavior, depends on reinforcement. And if we want parents to keep showing up, we need to give them a reason that's felt, not just explained. All right. We've made it to the end of our framework. The M in our system framework stands for measure and show progress. This is the step that ties everything together, because even if you've done everything else, you've understood their values, you've created a structure, you've adapted to the family's world, you've listened to feedback, and you've taught them meaningful skills. If the parent can't see the progress, they may not believe it's there. We know from Chadwell et al. 2019 that how we deliver services, not just what we teach, affects outcomes. And from Callahan et al. 2019, we know that our interpersonal skills shape how effective we appear to families. But none of that matters if parents leave a session wondering, are we even getting anywhere? This is where progress tracking becomes more than a clinical requirement. It becomes a tool for trust, momentum, and motivation. So let's talk about how we can do this well in terms of for the family. You guys are already collecting data and showing it well in your treatment plans. Most BCBAs are already measuring progress. You track targets, you calculate percentages, and you update graphs. But are we showing progress that parents care about and understand? Think about a typical graph. It shows acquisition of fans or reduction in behavior frequency. That's useful for us, and it's critical for insurance reports. But what does that actually mean to a parent who just wants to take their child to the grocery store without a meltdown? We need a parallel data system, one that reflects the parents' goals, their stressors, and their wins. Start by choosing just one or two indicators that genuinely matter to the parent. So not the clinical ones that we usually track, like requests increased by 17%, but something like he asked to go outside without melting down, or something that they'll actually recognize as a win in their real life. Then track that progress in a way that the parent can actually see it. Maybe it's a sticker chart on the fridge. Maybe it's a simple checklist you fill out together during sessions, or it could be a shared Google sheet with green and yellow highlights. The format doesn't matter nearly as much as the fact that it's visible and that it means something to them. And finally, carve out time to share that progress with the family. Don't let it sit in a report or a graph they never see. Actually talk about it out loud. Point to the progress. Celebrate the moment. Let the parent feel what it's like to make change happen. Because when they see that their effort is working, when the process feels real and rewarding, they're going to keep going. They're going to stay involved. They're going to talk positively about your services. and they move from observer to active participant with their child. This is how we close that loop. Yes, teaching skills is critical, but showing families why it matters and how far they've come, that's what keeps everything moving forward. So let's talk about what happens when parent training starts to fall apart. The parent used to show up, maybe not every week, but enough to check the box that you were providing parent training. You had some momentum, they were trying, but lately maybe something has shifted. Maybe they canceled 3 weeks in a row. Maybe they're sitting through the session, but they're not really there and participating in the conversation like they used to. Maybe they stopped responding to your emails or text messages altogether. Have you been ghosted by parents? I have. And if you're honest, it brings up a lot of feelings. Sometimes you start to wonder, did I lose them? Did I miss something? Other times you start to let that frustration creep in. And they said they wanted help. So why aren't they showing up? And you start to blame the parents. And underneath both of those thoughts is a deeper question. How do I get them back? Because here's the thing. Most of the time, disengagement isn't about the parent not caring about services or their child. It's about a mismatch between what we're offering and what they're experiencing. The system we built didn't keep pace with their world. I want to show you something that stopped me in my tracks. I know there are a lot of words on these 2 slides, but you can download the slide notes and take your time reading the actual posts if you're interested and taking this for CEUs. This is a real conversation from a parent group I'm part of on Facebook. The mom was reaching out for help because her 3-year-old son had started an in-home ABA services a few months ago. And she was already concerned that the new BT wasn't a good fit. She described the BT as soft-spoken, disengaged, and possibly even disinterested in helping her son. What really struck me wasn't just her concern about the technician, it was what came next. She actually said that she hadn't received any parent training. This is a family receiving multiple sessions per week, and no one had offered her a way to be involved. She'd only met the supervising BCBA once because services were most often provided with her mother present. She was still waiting for a simple data sheet to track her child's behavior. And here she was asking a group of strangers on Facebook to help navigate services her own treatment team hadn't explained to her. And that's not a parent who doesn't care or isn't invested. That's a parent who feels completely left out. When parents feel ignored or sidelined, we lose them. And we don't just lose their participation, we actually lose their trust. And here's what's hard to say out loud. Sometimes BCBAs read situations like this and assume the parent is the problem. They'll label them as uninvolved or unmotivated or difficult. But what if the problem isn't them? What if it's the system that never made space for their voice in the first place? This is probably a well-meaning BCBA who is swamped by her caseload and the demands of her role. She's probably trying her best to juggle it all and make the best decisions for the family she's working with, but without a system in place, she's failing this family. After reading her initial post, I knew I couldn't just scroll past. I responded publicly to let her know that something that too many parents never hear. You have a right to be part of your child's treatment team. If it's not working for your child or your family, that matters. I explained that high quality ABA doesn't mean blindly accepting whatever staff a company sends. It means partnership. It means the parents have a voice and they deserve respect. And I asked her, are you receiving parent training? Do you get along with his lead? Could you switch to a model where you only receive parent training until they find the right behavior technician? Because sometimes we assume the system can't be flexible, but that's only true if we let it be. Later, she responded and said, no one's offered her parent training. I said what every parent deserves to hear. I do parent training with 100% of my families, and no matter what the schedule or setting looks like. Here's the truth. That shouldn't be the exception. It should be the standard across our field. This conversation reminded me that even today in 2025, many families are still being left out, not because providers aren't trying their best, but because the systems they're working in don't make inclusion the default. And that's what we're here to change. Despite our best efforts, all of us fail at one time or another. Parents show us our failures by disengaging. When parents disengage, you have to repair that relationship in order to gain back any trust that was lost. Repairing trust might sound like big, abstract goals, especially when you've already juggling so many other demands. But here's the good news. It's not about making a grand gesture. It's about designing a better experience just one step at a time. And like any good behavior change plan, it works best as a system that doesn't just expect parents to re-engage, but it invites them in. When families disengage, the solution isn't more reminders or better handouts or more threats of consequences. It's repairing that relationship. We need to uncover why the family disengaged without blaming them. That starts with humility, not just a willingness to be wrong, but a posture that says, I care about connecting with you more than defending my plan. And that's cultural humility in action. It's not about being the expert in their life. It's about being curious again. And so here are the kinds of questions that can open the door during this type of conversation. Ask, how have things been feeling on your end lately? Are there parts of what we're doing that just don't fit right now? Or if we could make one thing easier, what would that be? These aren't diagnostic questions, they're relational ones, because what you're trying to repair isn't just a schedule, it's their trust in you. When a parent disengages, we often look at it as resistance, but it's usually something much more human. It could be stress, confusion, feeling overwhelmed, or even feeling unheard. And no, you can't always fix that in one session, but you can start to acknowledge it. You can show up differently. Maybe that means changing how you meet. Maybe you shift to shorter check-ins or video calls, even if they aren't billable. Or maybe you work with some flexible timing. Maybe it means that you're revisiting goals and starting smaller. Maybe it means explicitly saying, listen, we got off track. That's okay. Let's figure out how to move forward together and go back to the basics. Start with one small win. When a parent sees that their input still matters, even after they disengage, they're more likely to re-engage with you. Not because you've convinced them that you're right, but because you created a system that welcomed them back into parent training. Repair isn't about perfection. It's about being willing to come back to the table and invite them to join you. That's the kind of parent training they come back for. That's the kind that builds not just the skills, but trust needed to make real progress. So let's take a quick step back and look at where we've been. We've covered a whole lot. You now have a system of real structure for making parent training sustainable, collaborative, and effective. So that first S was schedule for success. Make sure to make it consistent, easy, and built into your flow. Y stands for yield to family context. Design training that fits your life, their life, not yours. The second S stands for survey and respond. Listen on purpose and adjust in real time. T stands for teach to their priorities. Focus on what matters most to them, not just what's on the form or the treatment plan. E stands for engineer reinforcement. Make participation feel rewarding every single time. And then M stands for measure and show progress. Let families see the difference that they're making with their child. This isn't a script, it's a structure. Use it to build a parent training system that families don't just agree to, they actually believe in it. They show up for it and they stick with it. So you've got the framework, you've seen how each step can change the way families experience parent training, but knowledge alone isn't enough. If you want different outcomes, you need to do something different on purpose. So here's where I recommend you start. I know that we've gone through a lot, so you really need to just take it one step at a time. Pick one step in the system framework. Just start with one. The one that feels most urgent, or maybe it feels most broken to you, or honestly, maybe it's just the easiest one for you to fix. Maybe you'll start by scheduling sessions more strategically, or maybe you're going to build a structured feedback loop. Maybe you'll redesign how you set goals with families so that they actually see the value. Then you make that one small change. Don't wait until you have the perfect system in place. Just try something. Track what happens and adjust as you go. And if you're part of a team, bring this framework into your conversations. Talk about it in team meetings. Look at the process together and ask, where are our system gaps? Where are parents slipping through? Because this isn't about doing more, it's just about doing it smarter. You already care deeply about the families that you serve. Now you have a structure to help that care work better. Let's start building systems that support outcomes that we all want. All right, so let's be honest. Knowing what to do is only half the battle, and actually doing it, that's where all of those barriers that we first talked about showed up. They're not about motivation. They're about the conditions of and the realities of our positions. I want to touch on each of the potential barriers that we talked about earlier and give you the steps that you can use to overcome those when they come up, because they definitely, you're going to experience some barriers in parent training. So the first barrier was you've never seen a well-structured parent training system, and here's what you can do about it. Use the system framework as your blueprint. We also have the Achieve Parent Training curriculum and the Achieve online parent training system. So we have lots of resources to help you design a parent training system within your practice. You don't have to imagine what good looks like. We've mapped it out for you. Each piece is part of a bigger whole. Start by modeling just one piece, then layer the rest in over time. You don't have to change all of your strategies at once. So I'm going to link to some of those resources below the video so that you can research what would be best for your practice. The second barrier was that the research is scattered. So here's what you can do about it. Let this training be your synthesis. We pulled together the research on ethics, engagement, cultural humility, and systems development. You don't need to read 20 papers. You need a path forward. That's what this framework gives you. If you are compelled to read the research yourself, the references are listed below the video if you're taking this for CEUs. Some of the research articles are very interesting. All right, barrier 3, the job won't pause to give you time. And here's what you can do about it. Embed changes into what you're already doing. You don't need a week of planning time to get started. Use your next parent check-in to try just one idea. Schedule a feedback question. Shift how you frame a goal. Real change can happen mid-session. You don't need extra time for this. Here's barrier number 4. You don't know what will work across families, and here's what you can do about it. Use the system framework to balance structure with flexibility. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach, and it's not starting from scratch. It's a scaffold. So it's solid enough to guide you, and it's flexible enough to adapt to each of your families. And here's the last barrier. If might feel a little risky to experiment with something new. And here's what you can do about that. Use the tools provided to test, not guess. You're not improvising, you're implementing a research-backed model. And when parents see even small shifts working, they start to lean in. That momentum makes the risk feel a little bit safer. You don't need to fix everything at once. You just need to take the next step and make it clear. And now you have the system to help you do it. So we've talked a lot about the system framework. You've seen how it solves real problems with real structure, but maybe you're thinking, this sounds amazing, but I don't have the time to build all of this. And you're certainly right to think that. You have treatment plans to write, staff to supervise, clients to serve. You don't get 2 hours a week to reinvent your parent training system from scratch. And that's why I created Achieve. It's everything we just covered already built. So you don't have to piece it together with handouts or scramble for videos 5 minutes before your next parent training session. Instead, you get clear, organized parent training paths. There's 12 different paths. You get on-demand lessons and homework that align with your clinical goals. You get a progress tracking system that shows who's learning and where support is needed. And you get a parent-facing hub that looks polished and professional without you needing to design anything. Achieve doesn't just align with the system framework, it runs on it. If you're ready for parent training that actually supports your families and gives you back your Fridays, this is going to help you get started. I'll put the link below the video if you want to check it out. And that's it. I want to make sure that you have your final code word before you hop off. That final code word is Achieve. When you use Achieve to follow the system framework, you help your clients and their families experience success. So one last time, that final code word is Achieve. And that wraps it up for today. I hope you walk away with the tools you need to fully engage parents in parent training. As you can tell, this is a huge passion of mine, and I'm thrilled to have the chance to share it with all of you today. If you're watching this for CEUs, you will need to complete the quiz in the Mission Accomplished lesson. There's a brief survey in that same form. Please take a minute to complete it and let me know what you thought of this course. It helps me improve the courses I'm offering. Make sure to email us with any questions at support@masteraba.com. Thank you for joining me today, and I will see you in the comments.